Well, good morning. It's so great to have you all here. Thank you for joining us for the reunion with class discussion. We're really excited to have this discussion because reunion is such a big part of what we do in terms of alumni engagement. So it's great to see so many of you here. My name is Tasneem Goodman. I am a graduate of the college and the law school, and I have served on multiple reunion committees for both of those schools, and it's been an absolute pleasure, one of the most enjoyable volunteer activities that I've had personally. And we have a fantastic panel of folks, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves after I just give them a brief little introduction. To my far left is Dr. Coleman Seskin. Coleman has 4 degrees from the university, so the three of us combined just barely have one more degree than he does. But we're very excited to have Coleman here. To Coleman's right is Ann Choate, who is a graduate of the college, and then to my left is Martin Salvucci, who is a graduate of both the college and has a master's degree from the university. So I'm so glad to have them here. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves in a moment. But before we get started, I wanted to just get a sense of who's in the room so that we can have the best opportunity to sort of address your specific interests and concerns. So first, we're going to do a little bit of an audience survey here. This is the beginning of the interactive part, but not the end of the interactive part. So I want to encourage you all to ask questions as we go along. If there are particular things that are on your mind about how you engage with reunion committees, how you engage your classes in reunions, all those things, we're going to try and cover a lot of those issues. But to the extent that there is a burning question that you must ask, you have I'm empowering you now to ask those questions. That's what's going to make our discussion today most valuable. So please pipe in. We've got a nice small group, so hopefully we'll be able to make this more of a roundtable discussion than a lecture at you panel discussion. So before, let's sort of get our interactive juices flowing with my little participation survey here. First, how many people graduated within the last 5 years from the university? Okay, good. A lot of new graduates. And how about between 6 and 15 years ago? No? Okay. 16 and 25. Between 16 and 25. 2 troublemakers back there. Okay, good. And how about more than 26 years ago? Oh, very well balanced group. So we've got some young ones and some more erudite, experienced ones, and then a couple of troublemakers in between. Fantastic. And how many people have served? That's you two. That's right. I'm talking about you guys. Just clarifying. That's who I'm talking about. How many of you have served on one or more reunion committees in the past? Oh, great. So several people who are experienced. And then how many of you are considering or have volunteered to serve for the first time on a reunion committee? Okay. And the rest of you, we just haven't twisted your arms or tapped your shoulders hard enough yet. But we will, so don't worry. That is also part of this. Okay, well, great. I want to give our panelists then an opportunity to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about their engagement with the university and their engagement specifically with reunion. So I'll start all the way at the far left with Coleman.
Okay. I entered in 51. We like to boast that we were the last class admitted under Hutchins. Got my bachelor's in 55. And master's in BS in 56, because I entered the med school, and then a master's and an MD in 59. And I've been connected with the university for a long time. Was on almost all the committees in the buy-side division, been on the visiting committee of the college. And what I said in Rockefeller once, I regarded my experience here as such a profound one and an important one, that I felt a moral obligation to do something for the university. And of course, to remain independent, it has to have money. But it proved in this work to be a pure pleasure, and I think you're going to find it that way too.
I'm Ann Choate. I graduated from the undergrad in 2001. I was the co-chair of my 10th reunion committee last year. And I've done a lot of other things for the university as well, including interviewing undergrads for admission, interviewing for various not scholarships, for various positions. Very much like Coleman, I feel bound to the university. It was an integral part of my life and changed a lot of how I saw things growing up and how I thought about things and analyzed things. So giving back to the university means a lot to me. And the great thing about the university is you find a lot of like-minded people who have that same experience, regardless of what year they've graduated. So there's always that common bond.
Hi, Martin Salvucci. I graduated from the college in 2010. I'd like to say it was the university's first mistake, giving me a bachelor's degree. Unfortunately, they didn't learn much, and they let me into a graduate program, and I got a master's degree in August. And the third mistake, I guess, is that, like the two of them, I feel, bound to serve in a way, and was just hired to do fundraising for the university in a professional capacity. So I'm a lifer in training, I guess.
Well, great. Thank you all for being here. Let's start then with sort of how we make our class reunions and class celebrations unique and meaningful. And I'd love to ask you all what your reunions have meant for you and your classmates. What has been particularly meaningful about them? Coleman, I'd love to start with you.
I think because it's been such a profound experience, it's fascinating to come back year after year and to see what the education has done with how they've developed their lives. And I think you're going to find over the years that the profound experience of this university lasts through their life. Most people do quite well, and they remain U of C'ers even later, although we don't always agree on everything.
Anne, how about you?
The great thing about reunion for us was the ability to pull in all sorts of people into our committee, people we had met before, people we hadn't, and making those new friendships with people that I regret not knowing 10 years ago, because they're incredible people, and I think they have always been incredible people because we have that bond. So having those events, and the other thing is, part of our reunion, we had events leading up to reunion, so it helped build those new friendships so that you could say, let's go to reunion together, let's go to the pub or go wherever we want to go, let's revisit our dorm, and it reinforced old relationships and created new bonds.
Martin, anything different?
Well, so I've only had one reunion, obviously. It was a good one, from what I remember. But I'll say that, in general, I think, this has always been the case, and maybe especially so in the last couple of years. It's very hard being in your early 20s, trying to kind of find your way in a world which is, getting more difficult to succeed in by the moment. And I've got a couple friends here from college that were on the first reunion as well, and I think everyone would probably agree that when you're that busy and when you're that sort of harried by all of these other pressures, finding a job, working long days, trying to make rent, it's really nice to have a reason and an excuse and sort of the motivation to end up talking to this kind of core group of people that hopefully you really like and get along with every so often. And then, in June, obviously, to get together and, to have a pretty cool party.
Anne and Coleman, I'm interested in your thoughts about how the meaning or the experience of reunion has changed over the years. Was it different when you were a newer graduate of the university, and has it meant different things to you as your time away from the university has grown?
Yeah, well, you can't make more old friends, and it's interesting to see how their lives have developed and views of things. They still have a critical thinking ability. You start reminiscing more as you get older. At one point I said to somebody that I'm from the world of the formerly intelligent, and he said, what do you mean by that? And I said, what happened? And I said, life happened. But you do value these people, and it's fascinating to watch their development over the years. You'll find in the earlier years that there will be a few less that will come, but the curiosity gets them, and when they get up in the 30, 35, 40, then 50, they tend to come back. You get bigger crowds.
My experience so far has been very similar to Coleman's, insofar as the fifth reunion wasn't as important. I still felt like, well, I'm connected to the people that mattered to me. What does it matter whether or not I go to reunion? But by the 10th reunion, it was like, well, there are all those people I haven't touched base with, that I've lost touch with, that I've loved to reconnect with. And reunion is the perfect excuse to pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, where have you been the last 10 years? I'm on the reunion committee and wanted to touch base. And it's a great excuse as you go into future reunions to touch base with people that you've lost contact with that you might regret.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And tell me, have there been particular activities, all three of you, in your reunion volunteerism or at your actual reunions that have made those experiences particularly NAMI? Really fun, exciting, heart-filling. What about your reunions or your volunteer experience on the reunion committees has been particularly fulfilling?
Well, making a lot of calls and getting people to hear. Seeing what life does with the body and the mind. Some changed more than others. Most were recognizable. Seeing what they've done in life. I think the major, they generally have some very interesting things. Like you take a cruise on the Chicago River, the architectural cruise. It's nice just to talk to them. And then the dinners are extremely important, where you can just sit down, break bread, and really it's a wonderful feeling. It really is. And I think people who are interested in people value this tremendously.
Martin, Ann, anything else that's been particularly fun or fulfilling for you in terms of being either at the reunion or volunteering on the committees?
One of the things our class did was this book. It was sort of like an updated pick book. So we had the old pick book and we had this new pick book. So it had a picture and an update from people. So even if they weren't necessarily there, you felt like you were able to reconnect with those old friends who might be, in London or somewhere where they're just unable to come. And I think having that pick book was a great, especially with people you didn't know, conversation starter. Like, oh wow, you don't look like you used to.
Yeah.
So that was a really fun experience. It was a lot of work. It was
Less
a lot
hair,
of work.
more
But it was
hair.
great. Well, yeah, and the thing is, it got people involved before reunion, so it built some enthusiasm and some real excitement about seeing everybody all over again, because you'd see a submission and be like, oh, wow, I can't wait to see you. I thought it was a lot of fun. It was a very different experience,
That's
like
awesome.
everybody kind of wants to bury their pick book and hide it, and this time, like, people were voluntarily submitting, so there were a lot less gargoyles.
Very cool. So part of this, I hope you all will take away. We're going to try and share some best practices, tips, tricks, and some of these more creative ideas that not every class does, but some classes have tried out, like the one that Ann talked about. I hope some of you will take those away and consider implementing them in your own reunions as you volunteer for those. Martin, anything to add about things that were particularly fun, interesting?
Well, we all still look pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Regrettably, I'd say. But, I hate to sound like a broken record. I know that, for me, last year was sort of wandering around in a haze, reading a lot of books. And I think talking to some of my friends who are back in town, again, kind of wandering around, trying to make your way. And the opportunity, to sort of feel connected, even in a kind of very isolated situation with, the people that you shared an incredibly meaningful 4, or in my case 5, and in the case of some probably 6 or 7 years, with, was really I think a good reminder of the fact that it will probably, hopefully, get easier. I think.
Yes?
Accept your invitation and jump in. And
Greenspoon, you are always welcome in the conversation. Any conversation that I have, you are welcome in, so
I'll make
please.
some trouble now. So it's been a while since I've had the reunion experience, and I'm on the committee now again. It's been, I guess I've had 3 of them, but for some reason the brain cells don't let me remember. So the nuts and bolts experience of reunion is there's a Thursday night through basically Sunday noon or afternoon, right? So what is the anatomy of the alumni weekend? Why is it that way? Maybe this is the critical thing. And is that the best way to do it? I think we all sort of recall the centerpiece of reunion being the Saturday night dinner.
The
event,
class
breaking
dinner,
bread.
yeah.
But let's take a look at what every alumni weekend experience is in this framework and sort of pick out. I'm very curious what's successful for a Thursday night, what's successful for a Friday, what's the. I never did make it in my 3 reunions so far to the Uncommon Core. I just couldn't go to class. What's great about Uncommon Core and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what can we do it in that?
Yeah, I'd like to.
I'd like to comment to the Uncommon Core, because I've been to reunion every 5 years, and I'm on the committee again for next year, and it'll be our 40th. So I've been to a lot of them, and I think it's only been the last 2 reunions that I actually went to the Uncommon Core.
You finally,
offerings.
the wounds of being in class have finally healed sufficiently to
I
let you.
was really rejecting the whole intellectualizing stuff, and I thought that they would be incredibly boring, because I just wasn't into that. And I was so impressed, because the ones I attended were so engaging and so fascinating that I thought, wow, I've missed all of these opportunities.
Huh.
As well as encountering other alums I would never have encountered before, and some of those classes were just, interesting enough that you could turn to your neighbor and make some comments and engage them in conversation. So it was, the Uncommon Core turned out to be a real delight for me.
And those are Saturday daytime events? Is that how?
Friday
right.
afternoon and Saturday daytime, and they're among the most interesting things you will ever go to.
Yes.
And they trot out the big guns. I mean, Gary Becker will be speaking on economics. I went to one where Milton Friedman was in the audience. There's a man named Lid Barbera who's one of the most talented, interesting speakers that I've ever seen anywhere on this earth. Talks about biological things, but it turns out to be wide-ranging. I mean, unbelievable. Just marvelous things. And then other people, humanities, the use of irony. And I asked him, what do you do if you got somebody who's very literal-minded? He said, you can't use irony.
Well, and to go back to a little bit more about the schedule, usually you have your class party on Friday night. Part of the reason that's successful is, especially with people who are still working, sometimes they can't leave or come to town until Friday. So even though there's events Thursday and Friday morning, for some, especially like with my class, it was really hard to get people to go to that stuff because they just weren't available. So Friday night you have your class party. There's all these wonderful classes all day Saturday. Sometimes the Carillon or the chapel has like concerts on Saturday. There's all sorts of miscellaneous parties. And then Saturday night's the big Chicago party, which is not class specific, but it's university-wide, so all the classes get together, which was a lot of fun. I've gone the last 2 years because my husband's 1 year above me, he graduated 1 year earlier than I did, so I went for the last 2 years. And the Chicago party is actually a lot of fun because you don't just see your classmates, you see other people that you might sort of recognize, might not, depends on whether or not they stuck around or came back at all. And then Sunday, I know that the university has stuff, but usually, at least in my experience for the last 2 years, you end up just hanging out with the people that you either met or haven't seen in a long time, and you have brunch and do stuff until their flights take off again.
Yes.
Well,
Meryl?
I think part of it is year specific in part too, and how you react to the various things. First of all, it wasn't always Thursday through Sunday. My 50th is coming up, and to give you an idea, the first reunion we had was at 25th. Okay, so there was a lot of ignoring for a lot of years for that to happen. And in our first reunion, we had it on Friday and Saturday, and that was it. We changed it. We did things beforehand, and we did things on Sunday, which eventually opened up Sunday and Thursday for opportunities. But it's not really set in stone. I mean, it gets set in stone for a few years and then evaluated and then re-looked at it again. But in terms of the Uncommon Core, I think for our class anyway, people enjoy going because it really is like going back to class where you can engage in the way you did, and in everyday life you don't have those kind of engagements. So what you like best about the university, or one of the things you like best, you have an opportunity to experience it again. But one of the things I'd urge all of you, because the reason the architectural boat cruise is in there and on this list is because our class started it on a Sunday, because we wanted some Sunday activity for people staying over, and we did it. And there are other things also. We had expanded dinners and luncheons and created other opportunities. And when I'm saying this is, what you want to do for yourself may be picked up by the university. One year we did a tour of the community to show what changes have been and talk some about the politics of what's going on in Hyde Park and how it affects the changes and the university role in it. The university took that over too and then made it a part. So if you really think about stuff that your group, your class is interested in, others could be interested, and it can be incorporated. So just because it's this now doesn't mean it's this forever, because it's what we all do to it that influences what happens.
Thank you for making that point, Meryl. And Meryl's referring to a handout that's in the folders that you have at your seats of past reunion events that were class-specific, and I think makes a good point, which is that there is a structure to reunion weekend that's sort of already set in stone, and then within that there's also a fair amount of flexibility for classes on their own to create their class-specific events, not just for that Saturday night, but for other times during the weekend where they can do things like the architectural boat cruise or pizza at the pub and things like that. It's two ends of the extreme, but things that are interesting specifically to the class. So there is a fair amount of flexibility within the weekend for folks to make it what they want it to. Once you've done all that sort of planning, you've created this great weekend, you've worked on these class-specific events, the Saturday night dinner, all of those things. How I'd love to know from our panel how you've made the case for folks to make the trip out for reunion. What have you said to people when you've reached out to them to encourage them to come about why it would be a worthwhile use of their time? It's a significant time commitment, certainly sometimes a significant monetary commitment if they're flying out and staying in a hotel and all of those things. What have you done to sort of to communicate the value to your classmates to get them here? I'll start with you, Martin, because you did this just this past year.
Right. Well, the first thing that I told them was that I was going to be there, and that should be
Done.
Yeah, no, seriously though. I think actually the lesson that I learned in getting people to come was the antithesis of that, because it wasn't really about me unless I happened to be sort of really good friends with that person. And that, the much better way to get people out is to connect them with the people that they care about and let them know that the people that they care about are going to be here. And, for us, luckily enough, so many people were still in Chicago that this was easy. We had a big committee. We divided the class, by sort of who knew whom and who was friends with whom. And, they called up and they probably did some variation of the, hey, I'm going to be there and it's going to be a lot of fun. And it ended up being a lot of fun. So I think that's...
Yeah. Ann or Coleman, did you have a different experience or,
No,
or
I think
something more to say?
the first thing you do is connect them to people.
Yeah.
And most people are going to resonate to that. But the other thing I throw in then is see how the university's changed. This place is an awful lot bigger than when I was here, and most people have a curiosity. I mean, it's enormous now compared to the way it was in the 50s, and it's a thrilling thing to see.
The other small thing we did, it was mostly the people connection and knowing friends and reaching out to them. But another small part of it was meeting challenges. We had goals. Let's have this many people attend. Let's beat the class of 2000. So that sort of class rivalry, let's break the last year, all the 10th reunion records. Let's break and that was sort of fun for people because they're like, hey, we're 2 people away. You better come. And then you can exert a little more pressure. Come on. You need to be number, 192. Or, so there was some competitive spirit sometimes, too, that played into it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yes, Liz.
I was just thinking of playing to Rob's point a little bit, highlighting, I think Rob made a good point in saying, we all know what reunion is in the sense of people coming to campus, but all of the different activities and trying to encourage committee members to also share all of what's happening, because the class celebration for one person may be really important, but then the uncommon core might be really important to someone else. So trying to kind of communicate to the committee to share all aspects of what reunion is that might grab different people depending on what their interests are.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I don't know, has anyone had experience with sort of other folks either on the panel or in the room with them, with sort of getting people hooked on particular activities that may be of interest to them? Jean?
Well, we had our 45th last year, and nobody went to the Go Party. Nobody wants to hear that loud music, because you can't have a conversation. And not many of us are up for dancing for 3 hours anymore, and drinking for 3 hours anymore. But, whatever.
Depending on your stamina.
But one thing that we did for our 40th, or maybe it was the 35th, in our era, in the 60s, there were these things called happenings, where they were just unscheduled, spontaneous.
Your version of a flash mob?
But they were always creative, and they sometimes involved faculty members.
Oh, yeah.
As well as students, and something was usually created, even if it was only temporary. And there was actually a film done.
How cool.
By people from Dot Films about the happening events that
Oh,
were
neat.
going on all over campus. And we wanted to see that. And that year, we had it as one of the Saturday activities, and it was not restricted just to the class of 1966. Anybody could come. And it was great, and people would see themselves in the film, or they would
Oh,
see a
cool.
favorite professor in the film. And it was very, very evocative and of the time that we went through. And if there are other things that happened in your era, sit-ins, any kind of event, sleep out, if there are photos or, movies of these things, that would be a commonality that everybody in your class would remember, that they would probably want to revisit, and then have a discussion about it.
That sounds fantastic.
Our class did that one year for one of our events on Saturday. We offered up a panel discussion to get things going of the sit-in and what was going on in the 60s and late 60s, early 70s. And our class is one of sort of the lost classes because of the time period and all of the upheaval and so forth. We were struggling to get people to come because there's still a lot of animosity toward the university about the way the sit-in was handled and that kind of thing. And so by having this session in the afternoon to have a discussion, we had a classroom that was standing room only.
Wow.
Filled with classmates and people who weren't in our class, but they were fascinated by the topic. And we had a great conversation.
Yeah.
So, and that was one of those events where there was a spontaneous get-together that evening because so many people had enjoyed that afternoon session.
Right, that's neat. Meryl, yes?
One of the things we did is, what was important to our class, we remembered FODA because we enjoyed it very much, and then FODA died, and so
But it's back again.
So we decided to resurrect it.
Ta-da!
And what we did is we contacted people in our class who...
Does everybody know what FODA is?
Festival of the Arts. And we have people who are writers, people who are artists in various media, and we opened up IDA and had a display of all sorts of things. And then we did it again, we used Walker, and we had discussion with Ned Rosenheim and Herman Siniko and said, you need to bring FODA back to campus.
Oh, cool.
And FODA came back to campus. So we didn't get to where we ultimately wanted to be, which was to have it open for all alumni, though we did have some alumni for other years that brought things for all alumni and faculty and staff and students to be able to do it. But we at least nudged FODA back into life again. And so I think that there's a lot of impact if something is really meaningful to your class, and that you can push the boundaries. Believe me, we push very, very hard. Try hanging something in IDA, they're not happy about it. but you really need to go beyond what is generally said. And at that point, there wasn't the Thursday thing, we had opened it on
Right.
Thursday evening. So I urge you to be creative and push the boundaries.
What a wonderful legacy. That's very interesting. Thank you for sharing it. I want to get to the topic of fundraising for a moment, because certainly one of the big pushes behind class celebrations and reunions is to support the university through financial gifts. And so I want to talk for a moment about fundraising. And in fact, this is an interesting time to be talking about fundraising because we've been in a down economy. And so I'd love to get your thoughts, and I'll start with I'll start with Coleman, because I know you have some thoughts about how, sort of in a down economy, do you justify giving to the university when you're in the context of a reunion and a class celebration?
It's a mixed bag. First of all, I've always felt very strongly that the university is and should remain independent, and that means money. The more they're going to have to depend on official sources, the more their independence is going to be compromised. But this is an interesting topic, one that I still haven't resolved in my mind. Some people are amenable to being approached at these things, and others will say, if you want people to come, you better not touch them, head them up for money. And I still don't know the answer. I think you've got to feel it out very gently. I'd really be interested in other people's opinions about this. It's a delicate subject. You have to be careful.
And I know your class had some interesting sort of tactics that you used to encourage your classmates to give. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, because it was our 10th reunion, we had a mixed bag about where people were. Some people were just out of school, some people were in the Army, and some people had successful careers at that point. So it was knowing your audience and where they were at. But we also had two different challenges. We had somebody on the committee challenge our whole committee to give financially, just to give something. Because we also had a 25 for 25 challenge. Our staff liaison found somebody in our class who was willing to give $25,000 if we had 25% participation, which was huge for our class. Other classes have different participation numbers, but that would have been huge for us because you put everybody who's ever given in our class together and you might get 25%. So the goal is to pretty much get everyone who's donated ever to do it again. And that challenge was, I think, very successful in saying, you know, we understand you're in a bad place, but if you do this, you're stretching your money that much farther. And that was really something that I think persuaded a lot of people. The other thing is, having already had that committee challenge where 100% of our committee gave, we could say, look, we've already got 50 donors or 52 or however many were on our committee at that time. So we could say, we're already, 20% of the way there or 30% of the way there, whatever our percent was. And so to say, we just need a few more, we just need 120 more, we just need 90 more. And then we also had a monetary goal. And when we got close, there were a number of people stepping forward saying, I'm going to bridge the gap so that we can say we reached this challenge. And having everybody who wants to bridge that gap, I think it helps the university a lot.
Yeah. Martin, you have the benefit of being the most recent graduate of our panel, and I'm interested in your thoughts about how you ask people who have very little money or maybe no money for money. Well, how did you find that experience, and what kind of things did you find most useful in communicating the value of giving to your peers?
Sure. Well, as Dr. Seskin indicated, excuse me, it can be a kind of sensitive endeavor. Obviously, not everybody in my class had a job last year. Some people probably still don't. But I think it's important to sort of demystify what we're doing when we're fundraising and to be very honest about the way that the university works. It's a partnership. This is what I would tell people. And it doesn't work if the people who get the payout from the partnership don't pay back in. The cost of University of Chicago education, if you can believe this, is far higher than the sticker price. I paid sticker price. It seemed like a lot. It was very painful, and it will continue to be very painful for a number of years, I'm sure. But having said that, the university, which was started when a bunch of kind of smart and rich people came together and did what they could for those of the present, and then each generation sort of successively took what they needed and then gave back, hopefully more, leaving it a better place than they found it, won't work if we abandon that model. And it's important to start now. It was important to start last year. We were very successful, and I hope that going forward we'll continue to set a good example, because I think that this is something that absolutely needs to be demystified. It's really important that we do this right. Probably the most important thing we'll talk about today.
One of the things that I did, I kind of worked this out for myself, and it will resonate with some. If you want to give back, if you sense that you've got somebody with a social conscience and some philanthropic ideas, I initially thought to myself, well, you know, I'd like to work for the university, so I'll donate a day's salary or a week's salary. And some people will respond to that.
That's a great idea. What about dealing with pushback or opposition? Which of you had experiences in which you were attempting to make the case for giving back to the university through financial gifts? Which of you got pushback, and how did you? What were those sort of? What was that kind of opposition that you commonly heard, and how did you handle it?
I know I had this,
Yeah.
but I want to preface it with my fear about pushback was much larger than what I actually received in pushback. And that's part
great
of
to
the reason
know.
when you reach out to your committee, like if you do like a committee challenge first, or if you have somebody in your committee willing to do that, you talk to everybody who's already on your committee, they're already on board, and it gets your feet wet if you haven't done those calls, and it gives you sort of a boost of self-esteem, like, oh, they all said yes. Like, we're that good. Because I know that my co-chair and I split up the committee calls and handled them personally. So we each had 25 calls as our first 25, and
Sure.
Nobody said no,
Good.
which is great. But then when you call the actual population, the most common for me was, right now is a really bad financial time. And sometimes you'd hear something and you go, oh my goodness, that is really bad, So sometimes the answer is, I understand right now is a bad time, but please keep the university in mind in the future. Because sometimes people aren't really in a position where $10 means, not having milk that week. So sometimes you understand, okay, right now isn't good, but keep in mind your love of the university and consider us in the future when things turn around.
Sure.
The other thing is sometimes you can turn around and say, you don't have a job. Hey, have you considered going back to the career services office? Saying there are opportunities for you to possibly get something now that you might need from the university. And hearing that, sometimes people go, oh, I forgot about CAPS. I forgot about, looking online to see if there's anybody in my field through our alumni directory. So sometimes hearing that the university can still give to them made them go, oh, wow, I still love U of C, even though things are bad for me right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, the most common pushback was financially it's
time.
bad.
Yeah. Remy, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wanted to throw out there, you will not get all yeses, that doesn't happen. But one of the things that I feel is important is always to make it a positive experience. So even if they say, no, I can't give money, counteract with, okay, well, can you make sure that your contact info is up to date? Because if they're willing to have the conversation with you, they are connected to the university. And you want to make sure that they stay connected in whatever form that connection manifests. So asking for contact information, make sure that's up to date. The other thing is that some people, I'm in the camp where it's not, I don't think it's a good idea to really challenge people for gifts, to really get in their face, because in my perspective, I think I'm doing, this is my third reunion coming up, but when I ask for gifts and somebody's really adamant, I'm still paying back student loans, I'm still, don't have a job, like, it's fine, and I quickly drop to the $1 ask, and then if they're really fighting me, like, that's fine, I understand it's a hard time. But I think in general, it's a better idea to always think about, can we get this person to a place where year after year they want to give? Because that I think is the ultimate goal. We want to get them to where year after year they say, yes, I support the University of Chicago, yes, I identify with that, and it's part of who I am as a person, as opposed to really fighting them for one gift in 1 year. Always, if you're ever not on their side, then take a step back and look at the conversation.
You're
Yes,
going to get some pushback, and some of it's going to be tough. We might as well raise some of the issues. First of all, some people are just not philanthropic. They're pretty selfish. The ones that disturb me the most, and you can't do anything about this, are people that I know receive significant financial help from the university and feel absolutely no obligation to pay it back. You're going to run into it. There's nothing much you can do about it. You don't give moral lectures. You're not going to improve that mentality. But the things you're going to hear that are very disturbing, and that you're going to have to think about this. I just heard, I'm going to give some stuff I heard. They paid the dean of BiSci $750,000. They don't need my money. They have an endowment of how many billion? They don't need my money. Think about it, of how you're going to talk about that.
How did you talk about it?
The university has to be competitive.
Yeah.
I admit that that's a lot. It's all the more reason that the university depends on philanthropy. It exists because of philanthropy. Without philanthropy, it will not exist. They are competitive, but you must have confidence that your leaders that you respected are using that money wisely and responsibly. You're going to be disappointed sometimes. It's the way it is. As far as the endowment is concerned, everything is down in this. You have suffered, just even Harvard. Harvard suffered tremendously. They apparently had a bunch of go-go guys that exited in time, and the thing went down like 33% or something. All the more reason to give. Do you have the confidence and the faith in the university that your money will be well spent and responsibly spent? But you're going to get some tough stuff, and those are the two toughest that I faced.
There's also the option of asking people if they'd be willing to volunteer, because there are a lot of us who, even if we're working, we're still struggling to make ends meet, and we can give our time more so than money.
Right.
And giving your time and your expertise in some way to the university is also really valuable. And you can do that locally, not just in Chicago.
Right. Meryl?
Well, two things. I mean, any place receiving money prefers it to be unrestricted so that they can use it for their needs. But in something like you got, where $750,000, they don't need my money. But the fact is, the students still need the money. And going towards student scholarships and earmarking it for that. I know because of the actions of the university in Hyde Park and what happens, that there are now some people who will no longer give unrestricted gifts to the university, and but will entertain the possibility of giving it for scholarships because they don't want to hurt the students.
And I know the Odyssey Scholarship is a great way
Right.
to do
So
that.
so there's a method there of still staying, unless you're just unphilanthropic. That's a basic. But one of the things we did in our class before, what we called picking the pocket in the nice possible sense, was that we called people and invited them to reunion first and talked about that and connected with them about that. Then later on, after those calls and letters, then we started asking for money. So it wasn't just, oh, you haven't heard from us in 5 years or whatever, we're calling to ask you for money. We're calling to say we love you, we want you. Then we call them now.
Did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I'm kind of curious, actually. One of the things, I chaired the reunion early on, and something I think it's true of any institution, but I think Chicago has particular challenges in getting reunion beyond the usual suspects, both on the participation and the gift side. And it's a big challenge because, it's 3 reunions in, it's how do you expand it? And
Right.
I'm kind of curious to hear sort of success, frustrations, challenges.
Yeah, this sort of it segues nicely into something that I wanted to talk about following this sort of fundraising discussion, which was, how do you get people to participate, both coming to reunion and potentially even volunteering on the reunion committee? How do you expand the horizons of the folks who are sort of the usual suspects and show up before they've even been asked to show up? Any thoughts about that? Ann, Martin, Coleman?
Well, one
Yeah.
thing we did was we threw a net wide for a committee to start with. I started with Facebook. Every single University of Chicago connection I had from my class got a letter from me or an email from me saying, do you want to be on the committee with me? I know it's been a while since we've talked, or maybe I see you every week and this would be a lot of fun to do with you. So I reached out to every single person I knew at that point in time. And then I also, my co-chair did the same thing. And then we invited everybody on the committee to reach out to all of their friends. And I know it sounds like, oh, well, that's such an unmanageable committee, you know, not everybody's, they didn't all participate. And that's okay, because when you have that list of 55 people who are, you know, committed in some way to reunion, they're likely going to come, they're likely going to bring their friends. And that means you reach the people you wouldn't reach. We also assigned somebody to our missing people.
The
Like
lost
everybody
list.
looked at the whole list and said, oh, hey, I know where these people are. There were missing people I knew that I'm still in contact with. I understand why they became missing people on our list, but I was able to supplement that information and be like, hey, now we can reach out to this person again. So the wider you throw your net from the very beginning, the easier it is to pick up. And then we assign people just to start looking. Look them up online. Google is an amazing thing nowadays, you know, or Facebook or LinkedIn or all these networking sites. So you can find a lot of the missing, well, not a lot, but you can find a portion of those missing people that you wouldn't have otherwise expected to find.
Well, I feel like we could sit here and talk for another hour about things to make reunions most successful, but we're sadly out of time for our panel. I want to just end quickly. I'm gonna do like a fire lightning round of one nugget of advice that you all would give for folks, or the key nugget of advice that you would give to folks who are volunteering for their reunions coming up. Coleman.
If you have that queasy feeling of, you know, I'm not good at this or I'm new at this, and just keep in mind, nothing ventured, nothing gained. A lot of people will respond to being asked.
Anne.
Love your staff liaison. They will keep you on target, on time, and tell you all the stuff that you wouldn't have otherwise thought about that you might need for a reunion. So they're critical, and appreciate them.
And Martin.
You've got a lot of friends. Recruit your friends to the committee. It makes things a whole lot easier.
Cool.
Everybody has friends. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I want to give a round of thanks to our panelists. Thank you for sharing your ideas, and thank you to you all for being so participatory. You met my challenge with lots of comments and questions and things like that. And finally, I also want to thank Liz, who helped us put this together. Your help was invaluable in the spirit of appreciating our staff liaisons. Liz, you did a fantastic job pulling us all together and making this possible. So thanks to everybody for coming and participating. It was a great discussion, and I hope you'll continue it while we're here for the rest of the day.